Alright, sit back, make sure the lights are on, and prepare yourself, because what I'm about to tell you will make you think twice about opening your door on Halloween night. In a small, isolated town surrounded by dense forests, the nights were quiet, almost too quiet. But every Halloween, something strange would happen. Something the townsfolk never spoke of aloud. At the edge of town, there was a house. Not just any house. Its walls were cracked, the roof seemed to groan and shift in the wind, and its windows always seemed to watch. It was the home of Samuel Crow. Samuel wasn't like the other townsfolk. He was tall, thin, always dressed in a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows over his face. His wife and son, they had vanished years ago on a cold, foggy night, leaving no trace behind. Since then, Samuel kept to himself, locked away in that decaying house. The townsfolk whispered that he had never been the same, that there was something dark about him, something unnatural. One fateful Halloween night, 3 kids, Jimmy, Kyle, and Sophie, decided to test their courage. They'd heard all the stories about Samuel's house, about the strange lights that flickered in its windows despite him rarely being seen outside. "We're just going to knock and leave," Jimmy said with a nervous smile. As they approached the house, the air seemed heavier, thicker, like it was alive. The closer they got, the quieter the world became. Even the wind seemed to stop. The front door, which was always bolted shut with rotting wood planks, was ajar. A single, flickering bulb hung above it, casting an eerie, pulsating glow. Kyle whispered, "Do you hear that?" They stopped, straining their ears. A faint sound, like a low whisper, drifted toward them. The words were indecipherable, but the tone was unmistakable. It was calling them. Despite the fear clawing at their chests, curiosity won. They stepped through the creaking door. Inside, the house was colder than they'd ever imagined. The air bit at their skin, and a faint smell of decay lingered. The room was dimly lit by a single candle on a dusty table. On that table sat a large bowl filled with shiny, golden-wrapped candies. And then the voice came, deep, guttural, and unnervingly calm. "Take one, just one. That's all you'll need." They froze. Sophie's hand trembled as she reached out first, grabbing a piece of candy. The others followed, almost as if they couldn't help themselves. The moment they took the candy, the candle blew out, and darkness swallowed the room. They ran. None of them dared look back, and behind them, faint laughter echoed, following them into the night. When they reached the safety of the town square, their hearts were pounding, their faces pale. "It's just candy," Jimmy said, trying to laugh it off, though his voice quivered. But deep down, they all knew it wasn't just candy. That night, Jimmy was the first to suffer. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a shadowy figure looming closer. By morning, he was gone. His bed was soaked in a black, tar-like substance, and the golden candy wrapper lay torn on his pillow. Kyle began hearing whispers wherever he went, soft at first, but growing louder. When he tried to throw away the candy, he found it back in his pocket every time. By the 3rd night, he was gone too. His room was empty, except for a mirror on the wall, smeared with small, black handprints from the inside. Sophie lasted the longest, but only barely. She began seeing things in the dark, shapes that moved when they shouldn't, shadows that stretched toward her. On her final night, her bedroom door was found open, her bed empty. The window was cracked open, though no one remembered there being a window in that wall before. The town was paralyzed with fear. The police investigated Samuel's house, but found nothing. The house was empty, abandoned, and cold. It was as if Samuel Crow had never existed. But the story didn't end there. Every Halloween since, a bowl of golden-wrapped candies appears on the doorstep of a random house in the town. No one knows who places it, and no one dares to touch it. But those who do, well, let's just say they don't stick around long enough to tell their tale. So, tell me, if you heard a voice calling you on Halloween night or found a mysterious bowl of candy on your doorstep, would you answer? Would you dare take one? Alright, listen closely, because this story isn't the kind you just forget. It'll stay with you, creeping into your thoughts when the lights go out. There's this place, Black Raven Road. Even saying the name sends shivers down the spines of anyone who's lived near it. It's not just an abandoned road in the middle of nowhere. It's alive, waiting, watching. People say weird things happen there, but most are too scared to even talk about it. Except for 4 teenagers. Ethan, Chloe, Jenna, and Mark. Typical teenagers, full of bravado, and more than a little stupid. It was Halloween night when they decided to test their courage. "We'll walk the road," Mark had said with that cocky grin of his. "Prove it's just a dumb story." When they got to the entrance, though, everything felt wrong. The air was colder than it should have been. Freezing, actually. The trees weren't just tall. They were twisted, their branches reaching down like claws. "This place gives me the creeps," Jenna muttered, rubbing her arms. Mark laughed. "Don't chicken out now. Come on." They stepped onto the road, and it was like the world changed. The night got darker, the silence heavier. Even their footsteps sounded wrong, echoing like they were walking through a cavern. Then they saw it, a faint light up ahead. "Do you see that?" Chloe whispered, her voice shaky. They moved closer, and the light grew brighter. It was a candle, sitting on an old wooden table in the middle of the road. Next to the candle was a small black bag, barely open, like it was waiting for someone to reach inside. "This is so staged," Mark said, smirking. "Someone's messing with us." "Don't touch it," Ethan said quickly, his eyes darting around the trees. "This doesn't feel right." And then the candle went out. The darkness was suffocating, like something alive pressing against them. And then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. "Who's there?" Jenna yelled, her voice breaking. No answer, just the footsteps getting closer. Suddenly, the candle relit itself, but Mark was gone. The others froze, staring at the table. The black bag was open wider now, and something wet and red was smeared across the wood. "Blood! Where's Mark?" Chloe screamed, backing away. Before they could do anything, a voice echoed around them, deep, cold, and almost amused. "Take the bag, or regret it. No one's touching anything." Ethan shouted, but the words barely left his mouth when the sound of branches snapping filled the air. From the shadows, Mark stepped out, or at least something that looked like him. He was wearing a black mask, its surface shiny like obsidian, and his eyes were gone. Just empty, black pits that seemed to suck in the light. "Mark!" Jenna whispered, but she already knew it wasn't him. Mark, or whatever he had become, tilted his head unnaturally. "You've made your choice," he said in a voice that wasn't his. And then chaos. The ground beneath them shifted, like it was alive, and skeletal hands erupted from the dirt, grabbing Jenna. She screamed as they dragged her toward the shadows. Ethan and Chloe tried to pull her back, but it was no use. She was gone. The laughter started then, low, guttural, and all around them. Ethan grabbed Chloe's arm, and they ran, the sound of footsteps chasing them the entire way. When they finally reached the edge of town, the noise stopped. They were gasping for air, trembling, trying to explain what happened, but no one believed them. But it wasn't over. The next night, Chloe woke to a soft tapping on her window. When she pulled back the curtain, her blood turned to ice. Mark was standing outside. The black mask was still on his face, and those empty eyes seemed to stare straight into her soul. His voice was low and cold when he spoke. "You're next." By morning, Chloe was gone. The only thing left was a trail of footprints leading back to Black Raven Road. Now, every Halloween, people say they see someone standing at the entrance to that road wearing a black mask, just watching. If you get too close, you might hear the voice. Take the bag or regret it. So, tell me, if you saw that road, would you walk it? Would you dare? I'm telling you, if you were there that night, you'd regret stepping foot into that house. I didn't believe the stories until I saw it with my own eyes. Let me start from the beginning, but trust me, you won't believe it until you hear it. It was Halloween night, and the air was thick with something unnatural. The wind howled outside, like it was carrying whispers of something old, and the sky was covered in thick clouds that swallowed the moon. At the far end of the street, there was an old house that everyone talked about, but no one ever dared to get close to. People always said it was haunted. Some even swore that anyone who entered never came back out. I never bought into that stuff. I always thought it was just talk. But that Halloween, my friends and I decided to prove everyone wrong. There was Kareem, Mazen, Sarah, and me, of course. We were all excited to go in and show that it was just a bunch of stories. It's all nonsense. We'll just go in, take some pictures, and leave, Kareem said confidently. I wasn't sure, but my curiosity got the better of me. We got to the house around 11 p.m. The street was empty, not a single car in sight, and the whole place felt eerie, like something was about to happen. The door of the house was slightly ajar, as if it was waiting for us. But that was the first sign that something wasn't right. We stood there for a moment, just staring at it. I could feel the fear creeping up my spine, but Kareem, being the bold one, walked right in. "Come on, nothing's going to happen," he called out, and we followed him. As soon as we stepped inside, the air was colder than usual, like something had sucked all the warmth out of the place. The floor creaked under our feet, and it felt like the house was alive, watching us. The walls were covered in dust, and the smell of decay hung thick in the air. "See? Nothing here. Just an old house," Kareem said, trying to reassure us, but even he was starting to look nervous. We kept walking through dark hallways, and everything in the house felt wrong. The kind of wrong that made your skin crawl. We reached the end of a long hallway, and there, in the middle of the room, was a door. It was covered in dust, and there were strange symbols carved into it. Kareem, always the brave one, opened it without hesitation. We all stepped inside, and just as we did, all our phones died. No signal. Nothing. It was like the house had sucked all the life out of them. We stood there in complete darkness. The only sound was our breathing. And then we saw it, a giant mirror on the wall. But it wasn't just any mirror. In the reflection, there were faces we didn't recognize. Their features were distorted, their eyes hollow. And in the middle of the reflection, standing like he was waiting for us, was a figure. A man, or what looked like a man, but his face was hidden beneath a black veil. And his eyes were empty, like there was nothing inside. Sarah's voice trembled as she whispered, "What is that?" Her face was pale, and I could feel my heart race. But Kareem, he just stood there, staring at the mirror like he was hypnotized. And then from nowhere we heard it. A voice. Not from anywhere around us, but from the very air, like it was coming from deep underground. "You've come at the wrong time." It wasn't just a voice. It was cold, otherworldly. And then everything went dark. Not just dim. It went black. The kind of black you can feel. Suddenly, the floor beneath us shifted, like the house was alive. The walls seemed to close in, and I felt like the house itself was trying to swallow us whole. Kareem was the first to move. He started running, but it didn't matter. The darkness followed. The air was thick with something oppressive, and every step we took, the shadows moved with us. Then, Kareem was gone. 1 second he was there, and the next he just vanished. No scream, no trace. We shouted his name, but it was like the house had eaten him. We turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside. The house wouldn't let us leave. We could hear footsteps, faint but getting closer. The sound of something or someone walking behind us, getting closer with every second. Finally, we managed to break through the door and escape, but it wasn't over. No, the worst was yet to come. The next day, Sarah disappeared. Just gone. We searched for days, but it was like she never existed. No one had seen her. It was as if she was erased from reality. We went back to the house after that, thinking maybe we could find something to explain what happened. But when we got there, the house was gone. Not torn down, not empty, just gone. There was nothing left, just an empty patch of ground where it used to be, like it had never existed. But here's the thing. Every Halloween after that, people still claim they see that house in the same spot. And some say they've seen Kareem, standing there in front of it, his face covered like the man in the mirror, his eyes hollow and empty. I swear to you, if you ever find yourself near that place, you'll feel it. Something is watching, something is waiting, and you might just be next.